there he is, yeah, Downham Market. Thought he was, Downham Market. So, yeah, he'll be hoping for good things at the wheel of his Ford Escort that starts further down through the order. So, safety car peels its way into the pit lane. 15-minute race for Combined Thunder, and the boss is about to get going here at Snetterton. And as the lights will go out any second now, it's a rocket of a start from the 5-litre Ford Falcon of Andy Robinson, but it's being matched by Daniel Brown at the wheel of the Sierra as they head up towards Ritchie's Corner for the first time and turn their way through. It is Andy Robinson that leads the race. Daniel Brown slotting himself through into second position, and I think it's Andy Wilson that's there in third place with Dave Griffin in fourth place. I think Dave Griffin has been outgunned at the wheel of the Beamer. He might be able to get it back though, as the heavier cars have to brake earlier for the Wilson hairpin. Up the short straight and in towards Palmer for the first time. No, Dave Griffin is still there in fourth position, so Andy Wilson at the wheel of the big Holden Camaro has made it through and is up into third place, but it's Andy Robinson that leads. Daniel Brown in second place, Andy Wilson in third, Dave Griffin in fourth place. Paul Hand is up to fifth place at the wheel of the Audi TT from 8th on the grid. That car runs on slick tyres, so there's work to be done on the formation lap. It's a longer formation lap here to be able to build those temperatures in those slick tyres. So he is now up in fifth place. We're side by side for 6th and 7th as Piers Grange goes wheel to wheel with Colin Voyce. Piers will come out at the wheel of the Mark II ahead of the Mark 1. So he is now running in 6th position. The Mark 1 of Colin Voyce is in 7th place, and 8th place that's Stephen Pearson diving up the inside of the Mazda RX8 of Clyde Hainsford. So Stephen Pearson must have had a poor start on the rolling start, because he is only now asserting himself back into 7th place, having started 6th on the grid, and he was down to 8th. So work to be done for him as the race wears on. The leaders though really stretching their legs. Fantastic soundtrack that these cars make as they thunder their way quite literally down through the Bentley Straight and Brundle and Nelson, but Andy Robinson struggling to get the car turned through the tighter Nelson and lost ground on the exit of the corner to Daniel Brown's Ford Sierra. So the Ford Sierra a little bit more nimble, not exactly lacking power, but a lighter car and therefore slightly more nimble, one would imagine, round through the twiddly parts, whereas Andy Robinson's car is going to be a bit of a handful through most of the corners, but down the straight, my goodness, not only does it go well, but it looks and sounds absolutely wonderful. Through he goes. Andy Robinson, the man from the northeast of the country, leads the race. Dan Brown less than a second behind him, just 9/10 of a second behind him. Andy Wilson going through in third position. Dave Griffin in fourth place, side by side for 5th and 6th. And by the look of things, it is just going to be, I think, James Janicki at the wheel of the Nissan Skyline that sweeps around the outside of the Audi TT of Paul Hand. So James Janicki, who's come from 13th on the grid, you could argue 12th because of Ian Bower being missing, but that now puts him up into 5th position. So after a poor qualifying, making good progress. I did have, I recall yesterday, suggesting that James Janicki would be one to watch out for in qualifying, and he didn't sort of live up to the billing really, but he is, whatever he's done, it's transformed the car overnight, and he is flying now, and his next target is going to be the race winning from the pre-93s earlier on today, the race winning Beamer, the E36 M3 of Dave Griffin, who is still a little way up the road from him, but it is not going to halt the charge at all, I wouldn't have thought, of James Janicki. Good fight between a couple of Escort Mark 2s, no, Escort Mark 1s rather, heading in towards the braking area for Agostini. That's Colin Claxton's green car. I think Tony Palmer is the car that is just ahead of him, so keep an eye towards that one. Not necessarily at the sharp end of the grid, but it's a good little fight that's going on for, I think that's 17th and 18th positions that they'll be fighting over at this stage, so a long way down through the order, but it will be two cars that are looking to try and work their way up through the order. The leading Blue Oval Saloon we've got in the order at the moment is Piers Grange. Now there's a lot of the Fords that go into the Classic Thunder, but for those that are registered for the Burton Power Blue Oval Saloon series, it is the number 56 Ford Escort Mark II of Piers Grange that leads that at the moment. Has quite a comfortable lead because he sits 8th in the race. The second of the Blue Oval Saloons is down in 14th, which is number 27 Martin Reynolds, so he's got a very sizable advantage in terms of where he is in the Blue Oval Saloons. Lead advantage has really grown on that lap. It's up to 2.3 seconds. Andy Robinson back. Now James Janicki, lots of smoke coming from the tail end of the Nissan Skyline, which does not look good, I'm afraid to say. So the marshals and the scrutineers will no doubt want to have a look at that. It wouldn't surprise me if it continues that either James opts to pull the car over, or they potentially show him a black and orange flag so that they can inspect as to exactly what's causing that smoke. But just as he carves his way up through the order and is now up into 4th place ahead of Dave Griffin's BMW, problems ensue, and already, Dave Griffin is back through and ahead of the Nissan Skyline, so I do wonder if James might have sort of eased things off slightly. So, top 4 back as they were. James has absolutely eased off in the Nissan Skyline. It was all going so well, and I'm afraid he's going to be heading towards retirement, I would have thought, if not up at Agostini, but certainly by the end of the lap he will be heading towards the pit lane and ready for Matt Suckling to inquire as to what happened, A, in qualifying yesterday when he was a little bit further down than I expected, but B, also what the problem is now, if he even knows, of course. He's now lost a further place, I'm afraid to say, as the Audi TT of Paul Hand has also gone through. So Andy Robinson is about to thunder his way down towards the bottom of the Bentley Straight, turning his way in towards Brundle and then on towards Nelson at the wheel of this ex-Craig Lowndes Australian touring car from some seasons ago. Still trying to stick with him is Daniel Brown. The gap came out to 2.3 seconds between the pair of them last time through. Andy Robinson, the first flying lap from him was 2 minute 3.7, which is only about 9/10 of a second off his pole position time, so it was not a slow first flying lap for Andy Robinson by any stretch of the imagination. As we await his arrival back over the start-finish line, what is he going to do this time through? Thundering noise of the 5-litre Ford Falcon works its way past me, and that is a 2 minute 3.5, so another few tenths quicker. The lead advantage now stretches to 3 3/4 seconds. It's a similar gap back between Daniel Brown in 2nd place and Andy Wilson in 3rd place. Dave Griffin is now up into 4th place. As I say, the Audi TT of Paul Hand up into 5th place. Up into 6th now comes Colin Voyce with his Ford Escort Mark 1. Sean Brown at the wheel of his Mark 1 sitting behind him. And then after that, the next of the cars is Steve Dance. Now Steve Dance started 14th on the grid, and his Ford Capri is now up into 8th position, so he has made really good progress. As expected, into the pit lane comes the Nissan Skyline of James Janicki, and he is going to park the car straight into the paddock by the look of things. So straight into the paddock area for James Janicki. Hopefully whatever the problem was in qualifying and the problem in this race, they'll be able to sort it for the second of the combined Burton Power Blue Oval Saloon Series and Edmonton Electrical Classic Thunder races later on today. The leading car in the Blue Oval Saloon Series is still the number 56 Ford Escort Mark II of Piers Grange. Second in that category is number 27, which is Martin Reynolds, the wheel of his Ford Escort Mark 1. And third of the Blue Oval Saloons is another Ford Escort Mark 1 at the moment. It is the number 86 car, which is Colin Claxton. His light metallic green Ford Escort Mark 1 is the second of the Blue Ovals. Andy Robinson is already heading out of the bomb hole and up towards Coram, ready to conclude a further lap. Lead advantage was 3 3/4 seconds last time through. 3.7 seconds first to second, 3.8 seconds from second to third. Wonderful noise again of the Ford Falcon as it heads onto the start-finish line. What does this lap look like from Andy Robinson? Slightly slower that time through, eased his pace off a little bit. The gap first to second still comes out, however. It's now just over 4 seconds, even though Daniel Brown in 2nd place just set his best individual lap of the race. Andy Wilson in 3rd place actually was a little bit quicker than the Ford Sierra, so the gap 2nd to 3rd diminishes. Not by a lot, it's still 3.4 seconds, but it's going the right way as far as Andy Wilson is concerned, because he was 0.4 of a second quicker than the car ahead, so needs to keep pushing hard. One of the best of the fights for the moment is probably for 6th and 7th place, car number 121, the Castrol liveried Escort Mark 1 of Colin Voyce, coming under pressure from Sean Brown at the wheel of the number 35 car that sits behind. And then there's another good fight going on, which is between the Mazda RX8 of Clive Hainsford, who is now up into 10th place and ahead of Piers Grange at the wheel of the Blue Oval Saloon Series leading Ford Escort Mark II, the silver car with the pink livery down the side of it. He's down to 11th place, Piers, but still leading his section of the race, the Burton Power Blue Oval Saloon Series element. As for time remaining, 5.5 minutes remain on the clock. Our race leader is now pressing on for the 5th time down the Bentley Straight. Robertson, as we say, lying second in the championship standings coming into this weekend. Hasn't claimed class honours in every race so far this year. It was the first of the two races at Brands Hatch where James Unicki, who's now retired from this one, and the Nissan Skyline claimed top honours, but Andy Robertson took a couple of wins at Cadwell Park, which is a circuit that he knows well. He's done plenty of laps around there, but you could argue it's certainly a circuit that probably doesn't suit a 5-litre Ford Falcon. Very tight and twisty, very narrow, Cadwell Park circuit in Lincolnshire. Brands Hatch, he claimed a win in the second of the two races there, so he's had 3 class wins already. He's only a single point adrift of Josh Ronchetti, who is an absentee from the entry list this weekend. So Andy Robertson has an opportunity to take up the overall championship lead, subject to what goes on in the other classes. Gap first to second, has it come down? Yes, it has. It's come down by half a second that time through. So Daniel Brown pushing hard. 3.5 seconds is the lead advantage. Where has Andy Wilson gone? He has not come through on that particular lap, and as I gaze around the bits of the circuit that I can see, again, not for the first time this weekend, the car has disappeared out of my view. No indication at all as to where Andy Wilson has gone. Crane man there could look down the pit lane. No obvious signs, I'm afraid to say, but Andy is out of the race, and now that means that Dave Griffin at the wheel of the number 34 BMW moves up into third place. The Audi TT of Paul Hand moves up into fourth place. Up to fifth place now comes Sean Brown at the wheel of his Ford Escort, and now Steve Dance in the Ford Capri gains another position, having started 14th on the grid. Steve Dance is now up into 6th place. It's been a really good race from him. Stephen Pearson, number 53, is in 7th place. The Mazda of Clive Hainsford, number 521, is in 8th place. Colin Voice's Ford Escort 121 is in 9th place, and Piers Grange at the number 56 Ford Escort Mark II, that is the leader of the Burton Power Blue Oval Saloon Series, now completes the top 10. So that's the order of the top 10 at this stage. Our race leader is still Andy Robinson. Now, the gap did come down last time through between himself and Daniel Brown. It looks as though it might have come down further this time as well. It was about 3.5 seconds. I would say it's very slightly less than that, not a lot. It's still above 3 seconds, but just visually looking at the gap between the pair of them down on the cameras through Brundle and Nelson, I think it's diminished. It's come down a bit, but not a great deal at all. So, and that's through the twiddly parts. By the time they get to the straight, which is where the timing is done at the end of the lap, it wouldn't surprise me if it's roughly what it was at the beginning of it. Traffic, though, is going to be the next thing that needs to be dealt with by Andy Robinson, because he's got Steve Barber's Honda Civic not that far up the road. Through goes Andy Robinson, pops in the fastest lap of the race that time through, which is instantly bettered by Daniel Brown, so the gap did come down. It was a 2-minute 3.433 from Andy Robinson, but it's into the 2-minute 2s now from Dan Brown. 2 minutes 2.920 from Daniel Brown gives him in second place the Ford Sierra Cosworth RS 500, the fastest lap. It brings the lead advantage down to 3 seconds, just as they're about to reach the back markers as well. And that lap from Daniel Brown would have been not quite as quick as Andy Robinson's pole time, but it was certainly quicker than Daniel Brown's qualifying time. That's about 0.4 of a second slower the qualifying time for Dan Brown that he's just bettered. The pole time was at 2:02.8. Dan Brown's just set the fastest lap of the race at a 2:02.9, so it's almost down to Andy Robinson's pole position time. As for the lead of the race, well, Andy Robinson is just going to keep pushing as hard as he can. He's heading in towards the braking area for Oggies now. He'll be able to see Daniel Brown behind him. There's more traffic up the road that we'll need dealing with. That's the Ford Capri of Stuart Kye is the next of those that they're going to try and work their way through and past. And then once they get past him, they'll start to catch the next little batch of traffic, which will just be heading round through Brundle and Nelson currently. So down the Bentley Straight goes our race leader. There's just 60 seconds to go, so next time through they'll be on to their final lap of the race. Andy Robinson has already dealt with the Ford Capri. It looks as though Daniel Brown has also managed to get past it just at the very bottom section of the Bentley Straight, so now back to being as free of traffic again for the moment. I'm not sure how much more traffic they're going to meet before the end of the race. There'll be at least maybe one more little bit of traffic that they might just catch, and that I think might be Frank Robder's E90 325, so he's just coming past me now. There's Andy Robinson just at the bottom of the centre straight. Yes, I think there'll be at least one more bit of traffic for Andy Robinson to deal with, but he seems to have got his foot down again here and has opened up the lead advantage. New fastest lap of the race, is there this time? No, not quite. Slower lap from Andy Robinson, an even slower lap from Daniel Brown, so the lead advantage that was 3 seconds goes out by 0.8 now, so it's up to 3.8 seconds first to second place. So I think the charge from Daniel Brown was short-lived. They are now on their final lap because the clock is about to tick to 0, and this leading pair have a substantive advantage over the third place car, which is Dave Griffin's BMW, who is giving away a chunk of power to the leading pair. He is now 21 seconds almost adrift. Number 34 BMW in third position. Fourth place is still the Audi TT of Paul Hand. Fifth place should be Sean Brown's Ford Escort Mark 1. Here he comes onto the centre straight. Completing the top 6 is Steve Dance at the wheel of his Ford Capri, but Steve Dance will have to watch his mirrors here. Stephen Pearson's blue BMW is not too far away, you know, in 7th position. Clive Hainsford's having a busy race in 8th place at the wheel of the Mazda, because he's got cars queuing up behind him, which include Colin Voyce's Ford Escort Mark 1 that might outgun the Mazda in a straight line. Who's got more power? The Mark 1 right alongside the Mazda, but then there's traffic just up the road, so Colin Voyce has to ease back off the throttle and can't quite make the potential overtake stick. So our race leaders are now well and truly onto their final lap, heading down the Bentley straight for the final time. Underneath the vehicle bridge goes Andy Robinson, enough of a gap between himself and Daniel Brown so he can afford to pick his moment through the traffic, which is what he's having to do. Past Ricky Can's Aston Martin, which the Aston Martin specialist tries to stay out of the way at the wheel of the V8 Vantage. Daniel Brown will now have to deal with that car, but he can only deal with that on the exit of the bomb hole, but he's just too far away to do anything really for Andy Robinson, who looks as though he is on course for what will be his 4th class win of the season, and will potentially move him into the championship lead as well, quite possibly. And as he now heads up towards the checkered flag, which is being ready for him, Andy Robinson claims the win at the wheel of the pole-sitting 5-litre Ford Falcon. Daniel Brown finishes in 2nd position, but does pick up the fastest lap of the race with that 2-minute 2.920, and then there's going to be quite a gap back before we see Dave Griffin appear into sight. He's already had one chat to Matt Sutton, so we'll be having a further chat to Matt Sutton because he finishes in 3rd position, qualified 3rd, was picked off by Andy Wilson in the early stages of the race, but whatever happened to the Holden Monaro has allowed Dave Griffin to retake 3rd place, and he will come through to complete the podium. 4th place will be the Audi TT, which will be Paul Hand, who will finish in 4th position. Here he comes now onto the centre straight to complete 4th position. Keeping an eye towards Steve Dance, who's locking the brakes as he's got Stephen Pearson's BMW behind the Ford Capri. That's still going to be a very close fight for what will be 6th and 7th. Sean Brown's about to come through and finish in 5th place. Who's going to finish in 6th? Steve Dance will do it at the wheel of the Ford Capri. He will finish in 6th position. 7th place will be 53 Stephen Pearson. 8th place is still going to be Clive Hainsford, I think, here, because I'm not sure that Colin Voyce is going to be able to pounce on the charge to the flag. The Mazda, I think, has just got enough in hand over the Ford Escort. It's not going to stop Colin Voyce having a go, you know. The two of them are pretty much together, overlapping, but it is just Clive Hainsford that finishes in 8th place. Colin Voyce in 9th place and completing the top 10, but the win in the Burton Power Blue Oval Saloon Series goes the way of the car that finishes in 10th position, number 56, which is Piers Grange. From in 11th place, the car that was 2nd in the Blue Oval's home, number 27, which was Martin Reynolds. And then we should see in 12th place, taking the checkered flag, Tony Palmer should be coming through soon at the wheel of his Ford Escort Mark 1. Here he comes now, is it? No, the Ford Fiesta is coming through first. Here comes Tony Palmer, yeah, just heading round through Coreham now. Tony Palmer, he will finish in 12th place. And 13th and 14th, I think the last two cars to take the checkered flag are having a good little battle as well, which is going to be number 86, Colin Claxton's Ford Escort, fighting away with the number 21 BMW of Ben Dewan. Who's going to come out on top? It's just Colin Claxton from Ben Dewan, as those are the final two cars to take the checkered flag. So Matt Suckling has made his way back into the Parc Ferme area once more to chat to some of the drivers from the Edmondson Electrical Classic Thunder Saloons and the Burton Power Blue Oval Saloon Series.